Hello, hello. How's it going, everyone? Got a whoop, wrong side. A little new integration. Slowly updating things. Feel free to hit those commands throughout the stream, and hopefully I didn't break them. But I thought that's what this little counter would be. A little fun thing, plus maybe keep people in to actually use them. Hey John, good to see you. The next thing I was working on was like a chat highlight to make it easier to call specific chat things out, and I almost had it done before the stream started, but not quite. Today though, we are looking at state. So part of this is when we were looking at the Fanator project, which also has a Tauri app. The way we're handling like saving state in that project is to dump it into like a JSON file that you can then load as well. And that works fine for the web. As a local first thing, that it seems to get the job done for the moment, but something that I wanted to look into, this might be a little bit more of a researchy type stream, but I wanted to get into understanding the options that we have to handle like persistent state or saving user data. Ideally local first, but potentially we might want to throw some cloud things in there as well. So we have, I think we have options. And I'm not going to write off JSON as one of the potential options, but we might want to add additional options or change how we think about it. So I think that's kind of going to be the theme or the idea of what we're looking at today. And we might end up getting into trying things out a little bit, but we shall see how it goes. I'm pulling up the monitor on the side. I forgot to do that. Boop. Okay. So let's flip over to the screen view here. There we go. So where do we start? I know there's a couple of plugins. I don't know if they're changing for V2. There's a couple plugins for Tauri to assist with state. The goal of whatever we find or end up wanting to use will be something that we can save the state within the app. Also somehow works on the web side of things. So if somebody wanted to just use the web app, purely the web app, that would be fine as well. And then potentially have the option to throw it up into the cloud somewhere. So local first, cloud optional. And that might mean that we can't just use a plugin right out of the box. This is also it's finance data, but I wouldn't qualify it as highly sensitive. We're not saving like passwords or anything like that. It's a bunch of numbers, which is sensitive, but it's not like we have logins to bank information. So we do want to kind of keep that in mind as well. The benefit of local first is that it's not going over the wire. You're managing it yourself, etc. But also that's kind of the same downsides as far as security goes. Potentially somebody gets a hold of your computer, or if you have it saved on your phone, if you lose your phone. Trade-offs and everything, right? Okay, let's go ahead and see if we can pull up those. I think it's in the... Is it in the plugins workspace now? There is have it written down. Stronghold, I think, is one of them. Where did I write it down? I think there's just one called Store. Here's Stronghold. Yep, Store. Persistent key value storage. And we can see we're starting to note the mobile platforms. So some of them have already been updated for that. So that's also something that we can keep in mind. If we can have something that works desktop, mobile, web app, which would also kind of check both of those desktop and mobile boxes. And then wrap it in a potential cloud sync type option. I think that's going to be it's going to tick all the boxes, but that's not going to be easy. I don't expect that we'll be able to use a single plugin to handle everything. So the first one that we pulled up was, I think, there's a SQL. Could potentially check that one out. One of the options that's been kind of sitting in the back of my mind is SQLite. I feel like that's come a long way, and there's cats are fighting. I can hear them through my headphones. SQLite. I feel like it's come a long way since, like when I first started using it, it was like a fallback for not having to stand up Postgres. Like it was just an easy thing to run, and it didn't have all the features, but we were okay with it because we were just using it more for like a local dev type of situation. But like, I feel like the API has come quite a long way, and do I still have it up? Yeah, so fly.io has like Flight FS, and I had it in a different browser window, so I'm moving all my stuff back around. So we were talking about looking at fly.io on stream at some point here, and so I've kind of just been like poking around at it and in the background trying to decide what would make sense or what would be a fun thing to do on stream, play around with it. But one of the things that I ran into while doing that was LightFS, which is kind of nifty. I kind of like the idea. And this feels very natural as far as like a local first sort of implementation. If we're syncing it cloud, but also local. So we'll come back to that. But we've got Stronghold, Store, and the SQL are I think the main ones in the official plugin space. We can check the Austin repo. I don't remember if there's anything else there or not. We've got data. So some of this is going to be, yeah, we got to look in the plugin section. If you haven't been here before, here I'll drop it in the chat. This repo has a whole bunch of sort of like Tauri community type things, and applications is just things that like applications are like Tauri apps that have been made and somebody dropped up here, so you can check it out. But there's also like community plugins. Oh, cool. Okay, we do actually have these all noted and marked them as official. Okay, so there's the SQLite one. Interesting. And some of these I think are like, I guess not. I thought some people on the team might have done a couple of these too. They're just not. Oh, here we go. So the GraphQL one is one that Jonas did. Jonas was on the stream. We did the mobile stream. We'll have to. I need to like do something to make it easy to like drop links to previous streams on chat. I feel like I'm in the chat or something because I'm always like, oh, we did this on this stream. That callback would be, you know, check that out, check that stream out. But we did Tauri mobile stuff. We went through mobile on Windows, if I recall. We used Windows as the dev box, so it was Android. Anyways, so I think these are the options. We're gonna look at Stronghold, Store, SQL, and then the SQLite one. All right, so plugin Stronghold. This one is intended very much for like encryption, or it's expected to be encrypted, which has its benefits and is potentially something that we do want to, you know, as far as the security aspect of it, consider. To do. So it doesn't say too much here. Yeah, okay. So you can all install directly from Git. I guess that's how they have it set up here too. I thought we were also publishing these. It's one of the. Let's check out a different plugin. I wonder if it's a. No, I guess we do have it noted for all of them. I'm pretty sure we're publishing them as well. But one of the I guess you'd say issues with publishing into like npm is that what is in the repo and what is on like a specific git hash, or if you tag a git hash with a release number, that doesn't necessarily have to line up with what's actually in the registry. They've been slowly pushing towards making that a reality, where what's in wherever you're maintaining the code matches what's actually published to the repository, or the registry rather. But I'm pretty sure that's the reason for this. The idea being that the package manager can pull directly from GitHub, and if you point to a git hash, that should be immutable and not change, and should match exactly what's there. But the problem is that works for Rust. Rust is pretty good about that. You can do git hashes, you can do paths, because it's compiling everything every time you run it. So on the fly, it's compiling it. So it's less of an issue there, but within the JavaScript ecosystem, there's some expectation of like pre-building before you're publishing. So what you're actually publishing to the registry is never going to match, because it's like the compiled version of your actual code. And that has sort of gone back and forth on how far we're pushing into like build all the things before publishing. It seems like there's thoughts and ideas to shift back a little bit to where you're publishing everything in like TypeScript. And then the thing you're building with just has to compile all of the node modules. Anyways, I think that's the reason it's notated this way. But then the downside is that package managers tend not to work well with Git repos or Git monorepos, which is what do you do? So they haven't documented it too well. I don't suspect that there's been too much work on this since it was originally released. Maybe. I am not 100% on that. But I don't think the API surface is terribly big. Partly because they're using an outside crate to do most of the heavy lifting, I think. So we can use it on the JavaScript side of things, which is nice. I thought they had more docs around here somewhere, but I'm not seeing it. You can look at the interface. It is written in TypeScript. So I think we would do something like, yeah, and see, like we've got encryption type stuff, client, get vault, get store, and then you can get an insert. But there's you can see under the hood it's invoking to the Rust side of things, so it's handling all of this in Rust. So this is potentially going to be very secure, but everything's running through Rust, so it's not going to work very well for the web app side of things, which may be a potential trade-off that we would be okay with. I thought there was, so you can insert and remove. There's some special load a snapshot, initialize a stronghold, then the client. I think there's some like restrictions around accessing the actual data. So we got some more private key stuff. These look like different ways we can encrypt. I guess let's just get vault get store. So once we have a store, we can get on any key and then we can insert. So maybe it wouldn't be necessarily an issue. We would not be able to use this strictly in the web app though. So let's set that down for the moment. Let's look at the next option. The plugin store. I think this is in a very similar vein, but the idea is like it's just a file. So I'm suspecting this is going to be a little bit more of a like, we would use this if we want to. I mean, the example is settings. If we want to do like app settings or something like that, that might be something that we could do. So when you start the program, it loads all of your settings. I don't think this is going to be something that we want to use for saving your data though. It may be something that we would want to use for, we expect a specific settings file, and that settings file might include the data that's pointing to where our app wants to load. So if we give people, 2, 3, 4 options to pull in their data, part of that is making it easy to load it. So the settings, like a .dat or something like that, might make sense to store a pointer to the file or the location. I don't think, again, this is a key value. So I don't think this is going to be a great way to actually store data because we've got more than key data type store. So SQL. Oh, okay. So this does support SQLite, great, and Postgres. And this is using or going through SQLX, is what it looks like. Okay, so on the JavaScript side of things, we can just do this, use the Tauri SQL Plugin API, and we can load and then do database type functions directly with it. So like this method might be a way to enable more of a cloud save type thing. We would have to run our own like Postgres instance or something if we wanted to allow others to just use it without having to stand up their own Postgres database. But we could potentially sort of like abstract over this where we are in a Tauri app using this, but in the web app, point to a URL or something like that. And it's just directly writing, you're directly writing SQL to do the things. It is, as noted up at the top, it is using or relying on SQLX. Featuring compile time check queries without a DSL. Now, I think there's some, I think SQLX is a lower level thing. Yeah, like it's not an ORM. So the question is, I mean, I suppose we could write directly, like we could write our database functions directly in SQL. It's not, I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't know how we want to do it, but like theoretically there is like JSON blobs in Postgres. So like, I mean, we're already processing and working with JSON blobs. We're loading a JSON file in the web app. So we could save it in a JSON blob and then, you know, just a little bit of an interface switch depending on if it's a Tauri app or not, or how you're loading it. CORM, yes. Oh, too bad I don't have the highlight. Was that the thing you've been playing around with, Chris? That is built on top of SQLX? Yes. Rely on SQLX. Okay. I'm presuming that... Oh, interesting. Interesting. It's mentioned in the... Okay, I was curious. I thought I remembered you talking about one that was built on top of SQLX. Where is this now? Yeah, okay. ORMX or ORMX and CORM. So we could potentially use that plugin. So this plugin, it is I think what it's doing is this is more for handling like the JavaScript side of things. So it's giving you an API into the JavaScript side of things to hook into SQLX on the back end. That doesn't mean that we need to, like, I think for the majority of these like official plugins, they're more of exposing a Rust functionality to the JavaScript side of things. We could potentially have like Rust bindings as well, because we're already effectively writing them. But there was some expectation that if you're handling it all in Rust, just use the crate. You don't, like there's really no additional value in having that extra layer there. So you could use the crate directly. So I think if we would go for this plugin, this plugin would be intended more for the case where you want to kind of, just a little bit of wiring up in Rust and then handle all of your accessing and writing data on the JavaScript side of things within the web view. So we don't need to necessarily do this. We could use like CORM directly, and then we could have commands that we can invoke on the front end, because I'm presuming if we take a look at these, there's probably not too much going on in these. We're setting up some mapping, DB instance, migration stuff, a little bit of code to help load the database, execute select. So we're sort of like writing the bindings are a little bit of an interface from the JavaScript side of things to the Rust side of things. So you can see here, like, we've got a command. This command is within the builder. You set it up, and then the builder basically configures all of these things, and then each of those commands ends up being registered within Tauri. In which case, then you could call like a select on the JavaScript side of things. So there's this part hooking up the commands, and then the guest.js, I guess. I wonder why it's guest-js. Never noticed that before. And what this client is doing is, for the most part, just exposing the invokes in a little bit of a wrapper. So we have an invoke to the specific plugin command, plugin SQL, pipe select, and we've got close, select, execute, get, load, all within this like database class. So you start up this class, or you init this class, and then you get access to these functions, which are mostly just wrappers around an invoke. Invoke being the command, the way to run commands coming directly from the Tauri API. So we could do something like this ourselves. We don't necessarily need to use the plugin, and we could handle most of the actual lifting directly in Rust, which is what the plugin's doing. Just it's using SQLX. So like, I guess at some point, if we would use something like this and we write our own like interface to work with it on the JavaScript side of things, that basically ends up becoming a plugin. So anyways, we've got, this I think is potentially an option. So this is built on top of SQLX. So I'm presuming that means we also have access to, like, we could do SQLite if we wanted. And I'm still kind of digging the idea of SQLite, because that would be something that we could potentially support local first, both on a web app, from a web app perspective and from a app perspective. And then I'm guessing, you know, like if we used like fly.io in some way, this is if with the light FS, it's copying around a bunch of SQL databases. So I'd presume that if we go that route, we could also use like CORM to interface with that SQLite database. So what I'm curious about is if we look at the SQL plugin, so we got what? Stronghold, store, SQL. If we look at the SQL plugin, we need to, it's doing some database things. And it's calling SQL functions directly. We would kind of have to deal with our own migrations. And I think that's going to be the bit where potentially using something like CORM is going to help us with that, I'm presuming. That's kind of nice right there. And gRPC API is interesting. So I guess that's probably the thing that I'm curious about is, I mean, interfacing with it and writing SQL directly is not the end of the world. Like we could certainly handle that. And I think if we even considering this being an open source app, expecting somebody to edit SQL isn't it probably would be fine. We could probably get away with it. But the migrations are definitely going to be the I think the big question in there. Compare was diesel interesting. So I think yeah. Oh, interesting. So CORM works with SQL X. I think diesel is its own like SQL X plus ORM together, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly. All right, so how do we do migrations? Setting up a migration. Yeah, and see, so like this would be the bit that I think we could create that. We could do that, and we could have the functionality, but so this running this function, does it give you this? Does it handle all the migrations through Rust? Seeding data is kind of interesting too. So you can seed data transactionally. Wait, so what's this? Seeding data. You can retrieve a database connection from Schema Manager and perform operations as needed. So you can write also a query to do it, or C query, I guess is what they call it. Query insert into table. Okay. So I think that's probably the thing that we would gain using something like this. We would be able to handle the migrations. Set up the migration directory. So it gives you a main RS. Okay, so you get a migration directory and it's got a lib, a migration file. So the migration files are written in Rust. That's kind of cool. That is kind of cool. So you can run migrations on startup, basically. How would that work if we wanted to also enable, like this? I think this would potentially work if we wanted to go the, like, if we were thinking purely for the Tauri app. This, for the most part, is just straight up setting up the database, loading it, and then allowing you to run commands. I'm guessing within JavaScript. Wait. This looks like JavaScript. So it's kind of expecting an existing database to be around. So if we would do like SQLite as a local first thing, but also want to allow somebody with using the web app to use SQLite, what does that look like? That would mean we need to somehow enable them to run migrations if the schema changes, which is kind of rough. If it was embedded directly into the app, we could handle that for them. So that's not as big of a deal. Yeah, I mean, and I'm guessing you probably have to have the SQLite database established already. So I think there's some like potential precedent to trying to run with like CORM directly. We could effectively have something like this where we we could basically use this, skip the loading part of it, have all the load just happen automatically in the backend part of it within the Tauri app, and then just set up some of this ourselves, like handle these commands ourselves. Because I think the web view side of things shouldn't have to worry about migrations. It's only going to be like we could have the Rust side of things handle all of that. But then it's the question of how does the web app handle that? And what would be the benefit of using SQLite over just like a JSON blob? I think the upside of putting it in a database is that as part of our queries, we could, or like queries and commands, we could set up commands to where we would be able to do some of the compute within Rust. But again, now, you know, that's kind of breaking off from expecting a web app to be able to handle this too. I guess the other part of it too is if we have is that the music? It sounds like somebody's snapping in the background or something. I thought the cats are getting into something. If we do more of the heavy lifting in Rust, right now the web app is doesn't have any backend that it's attaching to. It is being served by Netlify, not running off and hitting any backend, and we're not doing any compute in the backend. If we do any compute on the backend, it means that now we are kind of going away from the local first, and we're pushing that compute up to a server. It makes hosting it a little bit more complex, but also now that data is leaving like the user's computer. So I think if we wanted to do something that was like local first, we would have to do, we'd have to do like WASM or something to interface with and handle the database stuff. There's a what is that? What is their name? Actual budget. They ran it as like an app for a while, and then they ended up open sourcing it because it just it didn't quite catch on. And I like what they were doing here, and like this is also a very big thing that they tout, which I appreciate. Yeah, have you looked at Actual's architecture? They were doing a lot of things. Well, I can't think of their name now. What's Spectrum? Wow. Who was working on it? Oh, find Twitter, whatever, go away. They run a Node.js server and IPC. Okay. Because Electron app, right? Okay. IPC from the website. They've got their own like this query thing too, which is a really interesting idea. So who started this? I can't think of their name. It's just driving me bonkers. Yeah, go. No, I don't want to sign in. Oh, it's private. Okay. Trello. Trello might have. J. It's an actual bot. James Long. There we go. Oh my goodness. And they were. What else were they working on? I am just completely blanking on everything about them. Okay, it's not letting me drag it. James Long. Can't click on Twitter because I'm not signed in there. Stripe is. I thought they were doing something. Oh, is it Prettier? No. Prettier? I feel like they did some open source thing before they started Actual Budget. They have a Blue Sky though. I guess either way I would have to sign into that too. Okay. All right, fine. Let's go to Twitter in a browser that I'm signed into. I thought they did some open source thing. Why can't I remember? So their website doesn't have anything. Let's make this much smaller. Here we go. Okay. Is it? Was it prettier? Let's go to GitHub. I mean, this is a complete distraction, but like it's really bothering me. Also, I guess a side effect of this is that we can maybe get to some of that easier, but I thought they did, could have sworn they did something like prettier or something. I'm just not seeing any of it now. Anyways, okay, so actual, it used to be a paid thing. Like I joined their Discord like when the first one paid, and I like what they're doing, but it's still just strictly a budget software, like YNAB, you need to budget or whatever. So it still didn't like fit the need that I was hoping to really hit on with something like Fnatter and doing cash flow analyses. But what's interesting about the architecture is they've got, so you'd mentioned they do Selectron, Node.js server. They handle the database stuff, IPC from the website. It also has this, they have like API that they had started working on, an API, and where you could basically query it directly. So from the user side of things, you could actually like query the database and grab information out of it. So like if you wanted to drop down into a lower level thing, you could do that, which I think is a really interesting idea. But I don't know that it necessarily means that we would need to use SQLite for that, because most of what we're storing is the transaction with the expected repetition, or expected what's the word I'm looking for? You know, like if you get paid bi-weekly, it would be like the amount and every, you know, say every 2 weeks basically, starting on X date. So like that type of data, I don't know how the querying would be useful there. So I don't know that like using SQLite would actually gain as much. And then it does some like syncing across devices and then encrypted stuff, which is really neat. And I'm guessing, based on what you're saying, Sean, that it's handling all of that like in the backend side of things, which is why, you know, like you look at the pricing and they say, until we figure out a potential plan for a hosted option. Their architecture was good for app, you know, for like an app-based thing. But they were never able to go mobile because Electron didn't support that, and all of their data handling is handled like on the Electron backend. So that's kind of something that I want to keep in mind and make sure that we don't run into that same situation where we like box ourselves in a corner where we aren't able to support other platforms because it's all very much tied to the architecture that we're expecting to use. Tauri in this case. So the data format though, I know they were doing some things with CRDTs. SQLite 3 in your indexed DB. Electron was a fork of their own for desktop. Really? So they forked Electron to enable some of this? They have an iOS app, have it installed, and have some possible server. Are they still running the iOS app? Maybe that's why I never bothered, because I run Android. Yeah, I guess now that you mention that, I do have some recollection of. I don't quite remember. I mean, they do have a mobile tag, so clearly they had mobile on some level. On Android, okay. Maybe they did have an Android then. So, sub-project, okay. So they did something with Electron to where they could also then support mobile. Can we go to the repo? Here we go. Hack. What's hack? Desktop client, desktop Electron, API. Is there? Okay, so you run a server. They've archived a bunch of this. Oh, nice. They had a YNAB import as well. So you run the server. I suppose that's something we could do too. Like if we wanted to, if you really wanted to get nerdy about it, you could, and you were really sold in the local first. You could potentially, like we could potentially expect somebody to host their own like SQLite or Postgres somewhere, and then we just work with that directly. And then we would still have to handle all the migrations, everything. We're just pointing to that. Loot core, the core application that runs on any platform. So did they? I don't see anything about mobile in what they have now. Did that end up getting scrapped when they open sourced it? Upcoming release notes. Interesting. So, what are they using for their CRDTs? WID murmur hash. I've not heard of that. What is that? Huh. Okay. Did they write their own CRDT implementation? I thought they were using one. Maybe. It kind of looks like it. Merkle tree. All right. So I thought they were using a CRDT. I guess my memory is very fuzzy here. It's been a while since I looked at this. If we would sort of go with this style of architecture, we could put the database within the app, or you could hit a hosted thing. So the web app could potentially hit a hosted thing. We could, in the settings, have that hosted database be something that's running locally. And like the settings would just point at the location for that database. So what would we gain? Like, that makes things much more complex. What would we gain out of that? We would be able to have a database that we could query. I don't think that's the type of an amount of data that we're working with. I don't think is going to benefit too much from that. We could potentially do some compute and store that computed information in a database. That might actually be... So part of what we're running into, it's less of an issue now, especially running on a desktop or whatever. The perf on this is not an issue. It was when I first made it. Not so much on desktop or on like a laptop or something, but on my phone I could feel it chugging just a little bit. But even on a phone now, like, this isn't an issue. So I guess the lesson learned, if you're making a web app and it's slow, set it up, get it all running, and ignore it for 3 years. And when you come back to it, your performance issues are fixed. Ta-da! But so I think potentially there's going to be a situation though still where we have a bunch of compute that we want to do. We want to do it in a like a worker or side effect type thing. We could also throw that lift into a server. Looks like they abandoned the mobile. It's archived. Okay. I've been wanting to like use it, but I could just never quite get over, like, it was never in a state where it checked all of the boxes that I was interested in, which was unfortunate. Both as a paid service and now as an open source thing. It was easier just to use. You need a budget. Why nab? So the actual mobile archive packages mobile. I'm not sure what you mean there. Sounds great. I'm going to take a 3-year break from everything. Also known as burned out. There's a real SQLite WASM build these days. Interesting. That was the other bit that I was kind of curious about. My filter kills the link. I don't have any specific filter enabled. I think that's a YouTube thing. Here, yeah, that's just a YouTube thing. Like, I can't even see it come through. Yeah, like, I don't have any other way to like see any pre-modded actions. Like it just does modding in the background, and I don't even see anything. Can I do? So I think like Chris can share links now, right? I think you can share links. I'm pretty sure I made you a mod just to see if that would work. And actually, I guess while we're distracted by chat things. There, okay, all the way over there. Try one of those. I want to see if my counter works. Try sharing a link again, because you're a mod now. So I think it should go through. Yeah. Is it yeah, it's a clicky link. Okay, so I guess if you're a mod, that works. I wonder if I can like configure. Can I make like VIP or something like that? And whenever I hit partner, I wonder if the like subscriptions or memberships or whatever like enable some of that too. Yeah, I'm not even sure. We'll have to look at that. I'll put that on my to-do list. This. Can we have a VIP or similar, or do I need to make everyone a mod to share a link? Big question mark. All right, can I copy? That'll work. Copy. Okay. Ooh, this is old schooly docs. Okay. So John, you were actual mobile. Okay. So you were trying to share. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Packages, mobile. Got it. Yep. Okay. There it is. Interesting. Okay. And I feel like this enabling mobile was one of the things that sort of like burned them out on this too. Like it's a big lift to do mobile and web. I wouldn't honestly consider it if it wasn't coming for free with Tauri. Big quotes there too, I guess. But so if we did SQLite in a WASM build, I suppose what we could do. Okay, so what would be the benefit of SQLite? We could have there's like the initial blob of data, which then determines all of the like repeating data. So if we go back to here, the like little chunk of data, the little chunk of data is, you know, like a list of these transactions and then like how often they're repeating. So like this one is coming in every 2 weeks or on the 1st and the 15th. So that like initial data set is small, but we could potentially use that to dump into, like we could almost use SQLite like a cacheable query, or I flip-flop that, a queryable cache. There we go. SQLite WASM would be a memory DB, right? Yeah, so like that's potentially a way we could do it. And we could throw SQLite on the web app in WASM and then still potentially get away with not having an actual backend. They were also using IndexedDB. That's just like a built-in web API now, right? Yeah. Did there used to be an open source thing that was like indexed DB? Or am I just not remembering correctly? So like we could potentially do something like this, but then it's storing it within the browser. And I'm a little bit hesitant about storing it in the browser. I think like a JSON file, you still have to at some point grab the data and load it into like even if it's like non-persistent, like Windows state. So like use state in React or something like that. It's going to eventually hit that. We could then from there save it back out. If we're using something like this, it's sort of looking, or it's basically like saving it directly in the browser. Yeah, absurd. Yeah, okay. So I had opened it before. Yeah, and this uses this is what was making me wonder about index.db. So SQLite, I think we have two options. We can either use Wasm in SQLite, or we can do like this index.db SQLite thing. I think what this is, I think what this is doing is tossing it in and doing some of the work in a worker. And it uses SQL.js. Okay. All right. Interesting. Wait, so is it not using IndexedDB? SQLite in your indexed DB. Just uses IndexedDB for the persistence. Got it. Got it. I'm honestly kind of fine not persisting it, because I don't know if this would be something that would want to persist. I think it's fine for their Electron setup because it's like built into the app. So like there's some expectation of persistence there. I guess I'm not terribly keen on saving it in your like browser cache though, or like within your browser IndexedDB. I assume there's some level of, like it's got to be at least somewhat reasonably safe. Security. So it ties this the store to the site. So you're not going to have the crosstalk, so you won't be able to have some random website access this. But you still have it stored in the browser. So like if somebody grabbed, this is really bright. If somebody grabbed your like browser cache or browser session, would they have some level of access to this? Music stopped. Oh no, new song. Would they have some level of access to this? I guess that would be an open question that I am not sure of offhand. I'm not going to write it off. But I'm kind of okay keeping it as a file that we need to like save out and load. Because I feel like that is going to you like either save out and load, or otherwise just like attach to a specific database, because I think that's going to give us a better like I suspect that'll give the user more control. Now the question is, if we would do SQLite in WASM, what does that look like? So this would related works. Ah, okay, SQLite. Look at that. Let's make this a little bit bigger. They call out absurd.js. Postgres WASM. So this is using like the SQLite functionality directly in the browser. So none of this has the expectation that we are okay. No, I don't think any of this has the expectation that you're storing it in the browser as well. It's more of just like the driver or the interface to use it. Does that sound right? OPFS. So this is using SQLite directly in the browser. Okay. So there's some third-party projects, SQLite WASM ESM. I think we're using Vite for this. So this would be like in a worker. I think I kind of like the worker architecture, because we could, in the web app, we could run this type of stuff in a worker. In a Tauri app, Rust can be our worker. And I think there's enough of an abstraction there that wouldn't be too big of a deal to, you know, like we just hit like an endpoint and it's either going to be a worker or it's going to be like the Rust side of things. I think we could set up that level of abstraction. SQLite WASM HTTP provides a SQLite VFS virtual file system with read-only access to databases which are served directly over HTTP. This sounds interesting. Okay. So what is it doing? Opening the database, executing on the database with SQL statements, closing. So this is using the raw SQLite interface with the added support of an HTTP virtual file system. Okay, so I think effectively what the idea here is that we get a database. That database can either live, it's either something we need to load as like a file, or it could be served at like an HTTP endpoint. So we could, like, you could theoretically serve this SQLite database. Is there... What's the limit on concurrent connections with a SQLite database? Because I think this is kind of interesting, because you could do, if we had a SQLite database file, the default is that you save and load it. You could potentially just put everything in there, call it a day. You save and load it, that would be like the default, or the lightest touch interface. You could also take that same file and host it like locally. So like you could run a server or something that like serves this file, so that as long as you're on the network, your your settings can just point to this file directly. And like here, we're doing it in the browser, and we're executing these things in the browser. We could also have that stored and handled within the Tauri app on the Rust side of things. And that would, like, we could have a very similar interface where we just say, if you're in a Tauri app, use the built-in one. If you're not, then either you have to load it, or you can go to like a hosted one. And if we went that route, okay, so this is specifically looking at read-only. I guess that makes it a little bit easier to multiple writes are where, and lots of people writing to the same databases. I suspect probably where SQLite starts to fall down, and it makes sense to use something like Postgres. What is this? Local first platform designed for privacy, ease of use, and no vendor lock-in to sync and backup precious data using SQLite and CRDT. Interesting. I've never heard of this. Is this like a... Has anybody else seen this? This seems very interesting. We happen to be using React, so like it checks, it's fine that it is specifically React hooks based. Local first and then encrypted backup and sync using SQLite and CRDT. That feels like a lot of, like it checks a lot of our boxes here. Stores data in the user's device so it can work offline. And then I'm assuming it does some sort of like copying between or syncing between devices is how that is then handled, which is very much what my expectation is how Fly.io is working. It works in all browsers. I mean, Electron and React Native, okay, you know, it's fine. I'm presuming we could make it work within Tauri as well. Okay, so it seems like it is a company which is expecting to have paid options for these. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and drop this in the chat. I think it would be nice to see how this works. I don't see anything. So it just seems like there's a company behind it, which has trade-offs in multiple ways. So with VC funding, there's some expectation of the VCs to get paid, which tends to drive a lot of companies. But there's some problems that are very hard to solve without the type of funding or the amount of funding that would come from something like a VC. And, you know, there's bootstrapping or open source efforts as well. But there's some expectation that the more money you throw at it, the more effort and times can be put into it. But if they're not getting a return, there's some expectation that you could also see the thing dying or just disappearing. But the same can be said about open source things where somebody burns out and just drops it because they They're just unable to maintain it anymore. So there's trade-offs. I think as long as we understand what we're getting into and like what that trade-off we're seeing here is, I'm fine with however they're expecting to monetize it. Because this feels like something that could be potentially VC funded and actually work out. Okay, so it's not peer-to-peer. Nice. And if it wasn't obvious, I found the link on the SQLite WASM page. So it's presumably using this. All right, so where are we? We want to look here. Okay, it's not P2P. So there needs to be a server, and you can run your own. And that's kind of interesting because like we could run a server that allows somebody to do syncing. Or you could run it yourself in Turbo to boot. Turbo, like Turbo Repo Turbo? Yep. I mean, it seems like it's a rather new project, so I'm guessing they're jumping on all the new tooling 7 months ago. Hey, they're using chain sets too. Nice, I appreciate that. Interesting. Oh, use OPFS. What's OPFS? I've seen that pop up a couple times now, but I haven't heard that before. All table columns except for ID are nullable. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Okay. Sure. So it uses end-to-end encryption, generates a strong and safe password, sync and backup only to user ID. Okay. This seems pretty nifty. I mean, honestly, I'm just from a base level, I'm kind of interested to try this. crdt.tech. So this is just explaining what it is. So what are they? Let's check out their dependencies. Packages. So they have a server, Node.js server for the library. Oh, hey, look at that. You can deploy it to fly.io. Express server, what are we doing? We use some common utils. It's using better SQLite 3. Some initial setup. And I guess that's really interesting too, because then if you're using fly.io, I'm presuming it's using something like the LiteFS integration to where it's then copying that SQLite file around to the edge. This seems really nifty. So what we could do, we don't have too much data. We could throw it in a SQLite database, and I don't think it's locking it away too much, as long as somebody's still able to like download their SQLite file. There's plenty of like SQLite viewers, so somebody could still extract their information out of it. One of the things that we could do then with SQLite database is when we could either do some of the heavy lifting on like the Rust side of things or in a worker, like side effect worker type thing. Once it's done, we could then store it in SQLite and then query that moving forward. And then we only need to update the database when one of the inputs change. So that might be kind of an interesting architecture where we can have like an async with a bit of a cache, if that makes sense. Because I suspect most of what you're going to be doing is like you would fill in this. You're going to put in credit card, checking entries, your initial amounts might change, and then transactions. So expenses like credit card, income, and then the accounts. So the accounts will change, theoretically daily or multiple times a day potentially. The income, expenses, transfers would change less often. But if we're just updating like the pieces that are affected by this, that's kind of interesting. Like we could offload a lot of the, like we don't need to recalculate it every time somebody would load it. So if somebody goes to this page, we don't necessarily need to recalculate this every time. It seems to go pretty fast now. So that's potentially less of an issue. But if we're doing the work, dumping it in SQLite, we could potentially also have an interface where somebody would be able to like build their own reports, which I think is, this is useful. And I think having like default pieces is useful. But if somebody is also able to like extend and build on top of it, creating their own like custom reports, that might be a way that we could then kind of continue to evolve this, where somebody could write a custom report that they really like, and it might make sense to be something that then gets pushed into, pushed upstream effectively. So what are y'all thinking? This seems, like John said, published 1.0 published 2 hours ago. Uncanny. It feels like something that's worth trying. I don't think what time we got? I don't think we're gonna dig into it today. This might make sense to try out on a stream though. And it might actually make sense to be something, if like we were talking about playing around with fly.io, this might be a fun way to play around with both those things. Yeah, you think you're gonna try it out? I'm also curious. I think I'm curious enough to try it out. Yeah, see, offline and like, I think it's pretty interesting. Like if we could handle everything offline and then just have the option to then sync it up to, you could either pay for a service or host your own, but like you could have it set up to where like you change things on your app on your phone, it syncs up to your local host, or well, not local host, but to your like an internal server on your own network, and then it goes out to all your devices. Like that's even an interesting architecture too. And if we could give the option to like for a user to run that versus just use the like a paid service or whatever. I am very curious. So again, it's going to be a little bit more effort because we need to consider database migrations. And if we look at where's their examples? We still need to consider okay, this seems to be where most of it is. We still need to consider setting up the schema and evolving the schema over time. I suspect it's not going to change too much, but nothing is set in stone. Hat effect / schema. Is that, yeah, effect TS? Interesting. I think that's also in the vein of like Zod or something like that. So most of the work is happening here. We set up some IDs, establish the schema, and then it's create a database. So you give it a struct, and then at that point you are effectively using it. It would still be nice to if we would want to consider moving some of that heavy lifting to Rust. It would be nice to write the code once rather than having to write it for workers and for Rust. I'm definitely interested in, you know, like the Rust based setting up the migrations. I think having Rust as an interface to handling migrations is an interesting way to like use that compiler and use the Rust ecosystem to ensure that your migrations are going to be valid and not cause errors. But this is really interesting. Bunch of to-dos. Okay, so then here's the database. So use query. And I think this is probably the bit that's there's going to be the server side of things where it's doing the syncing, and then there's this like front end aspect, which is how they're interacting with that server. And it looks like their stack is pretty purely JavaScript, TypeScript / Node. So if we would try this out and work with something like this, it's probably not going to make sense to put any of that lifting on the Rust side of things. Which might be fine. If we can side effect and cache most of the heavy lifting, I don't know that we would need the speed that Rust might give us. What does our Electron integration look like? Examples, Electron app. So this is one of the pages. Still doing all the databasey things. App. Just creating the root. Renderer is just rendering it. Preload. Okay. So this is where most of the Electron stuff is. Create window. Doing a browser window. got some headers. Okay, so the Electron integration is not that involved. So most of this effort, I'm guessing, is happening through the SQLite WASM, and so there's the interface from the browser to a database, and we effectively are then handling all of our queries and everything in JavaScript. Queries and all the CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete. Then what this is doing for us is giving us hooks, React hooks, to make that process easier, and it's giving us hooks to make the process easier, but also to have the syncing mechanism. So the server, you're interfacing with that server, and the server is doing like a local to the server sync to handle the actual data itself. And what's really interesting too is that it's encrypted. So interesting. I'm very intrigued. I still would like to think about how we handle, or how can we use Rust when we're in the context of a Tauri app, but with the goal of also running this as a web app. I think that definitely complicates the matter. I'm definitely interested to try this. I think this is probably something that's going to be worth trying, and I mean, they don't even have they've got a testing server, I guess, that you can use. They've got a testing server, and then they do have some docs, okay. So we could run our own server and play around with fly.io as well. Oh, hey, look at that. Coming back around. Yeah, okay, nice. So it creates a SQLite database on the user device and then stores all that data locally. Yeah, so every DB change is described as a CRDT message. Okay, so we could do something where we do a bunch of lifting on whatever device changes the data, and then we save it up to the SQLite database, and then everything else benefits from it. So it would be kind of it would serve kind of like a cache, but it wouldn't be just for that device. It would be like across all the devices that you're using this on. Which I think makes this real interesting. So Rust, if we run all of this and we've got the hooks that are doing all these database operations, we could do heavy lifting in a worker or in a side effect or something. Save that up to the database. We are effectively not touching Rust at all. we could also throw some of that heavy lifting into the Rust side of things. And like we could interface with that through commands. So like in the worker or something, we could toss work up to Rust if we're in the Tauri context, otherwise we would run it in the client only. But then we're writing again that work twice. If we had a Rust, if we had like a Rust interface where we could convert it to output it to WASM, that we could run it as WASM in the browser when it's in web dev mode. But then in the Tauri app, do you just use the WASM to make it simple? It feels like I want to use the efficiency in the compiler that comes with using Rust. And having a Tauri app and having direct access to Rust, I think, is really powerful. But the fact is, if we are expecting this to always also have a web app component, it feels like pushing a lot of that work into the browser continues to make the most sense. I'm not sold on that. But that is the feeling that I keep coming back to, is that it makes sense to just push this all into JavaScript. So I think we're going to write this down. I think we give this a try on a future stream. So we'll put it on the list and possibly run it with fly.io. Yeah, so the server piece in Rust, I think that's the so what is the server then? If the server is strictly the thing that's, I think if we would use something like this, all of the database interactions are happening like it's happening from the interface or from the JavaScript interface, and the server is the thing that's handling the writes and the CRDT portion of it. But I don't think it would make sense to like write our own server. Like we probably just want to use what they have. But I guess, what are they doing? I guess they just have a Merkle tree, eh? Because this isn't actually doing all that much either. That's kind of interesting. If we would, you're thinking like basically rewrite this in Rust and like as a hosted server. I am curious, like what performance-wise. I could see. Well, I mean, this is going to be running. You'd be standing this up somewhere, anyways. So this would be on fly.io, or you'd be running this locally, or what have you. So it might not actually make a difference to where having the speed of Rust would be noticeable. Because all this is for the most part doing is doing this Merkle tree thing. So like theoretically you could rewrite this in Rust without whole ton of effort. Just double check. I don't have any messages here. That would be interesting, because then you could have that server. There's almost like a situation where you would want. You could have like a hierarchy almost, where the Tauri Rust side of things, lower memory and security TSRS bindings. It's also nice just using what they have. I guess that's the other bit that keeps running through the back of my mind. I mean, they have something here, so it's easier just to use it. But if we would do like rewrite the server part of it in Rust, we could use that in the Tauri app. That's almost like its own server. But then can that server then talk to like a hosted server? So could I have my Tauri app running a server which handles writes, and then we do CRDT between that server and, you know, like a server that I've hosted somewhere, or a server that's up in fly.io? Yeah, I would think so. I mean, CRDT's all the way down, or up, down, around. Because we would still need, like, if you're using it on the web app, you'd still want the web app to potentially be able to communicate with wherever. So if you're using the web app could hit localhost or something on your network to do all the server CRDC stuff. So if you're using this strictly from the browser, it runs on all Evergreen desktop and mobile browsers. That makes me think that it's using like IndexedDB. Here, let's double check the. So like Common's probably gonna have a bunch of that type of code. Oh, this is also using protobuf. Nanoid. And so what's in this? The like base level package? What's Nanoid? I've seen that come up a couple times now. I don't think I've actually heard of Nanoid. Ah, okay. ID generator. So this has got no dependencies. Got a lot of like nested common stuff here, I think. Yeah, this is no dependencies either. So if you're using the React package, it is pulling in. Oh, they've got them all as pure dependencies. Okay, got it. The web keeps its same origin content policy. Let the rest do the networking, breaking those, but in a much more controlled way. It would mean that we need to run a server for the web app side of things. And we're still, granted it's theoretically encrypted, you're still by default dumping it into a server. It would be nice if the web app was also, I mean, technically it seems like it's going to be local first. we don't have to use the syncing service. And it would be nice not to have to. I mean, I suppose theoretically, if you put it in Rust and Rust was like running a server on the side, like if I open up the web app on my phone or on the computer, it could do the sync with the database there. I think there's options. I think there's options, and I think we could do something where if we tried this out and it seemed to work well and meet your needs, we could work with what they have existing and potentially evolve from there. I'm guessing most of the heavy lifting is actually in here, yeah. And they have some worker stuff already. So we could try it out, and if it seems to really make sense, you could potentially push that CRDT servers type stuff into Rust and kind of evolve the interaction between the Rust side of things and JavaScript or the web view / the web app. I think that's probably the tentative way to go. Everything else feels like we could use one of these. We would get, this might be like Stronghold might be sufficient and work well, but it's going to be difficult to do the sync part of it, which I think is important for this situation. The SQL is very low level to where we would probably want to pull in an ORM. That would mean that we're writing our own like ORM plugin with it or what have you, which it's doable. There's the SQLite plugin, which I probably would say, yeah, they haven't updated for a little bit either. Since this SQL, since this one does SQLite, I think it would probably be best just to use this. Or our own plugin with like CORM. But that still is leaving out the whole syncing part of it. And I think looking at something like this is interesting. Interesting, but more complex. But I think we could evolve into that complexity as it makes sense, and I think we would then have the option to push stuff into Rust as it makes sense. Like we could do Axum, like we could host Axum through the Tauri app. I don't know if you'd want to do that on the phone, but maybe on the desktop app you could do that. And then that might make writes happen quicker, and then CRDT between all of the other pieces happens more async like. But honestly, like run your own server, I think the first use would be there's a server that you can sync with, or you can run your own. You can run it locally or toss it up in the cloud, but then you're on the hook for securing it effectively. Yeah, I think I think it's worth trying it. We'll see. We can see how this goes. Feel like SQLite is an interesting approach. We probably would want to talk further though about how we might best utilize the Rust side of things. I think that's the interesting bit. If we are making something that is expected to be a web app, there's some expectation of having to hit a server. When you're putting that same content within a Tauri app, you can think of the Rust backend like a server. But it's a server that you can shut down. But we're pushing so much on the front end already, so we can handle most of the effort client side, so we don't need to for the open source like web app part of it run like a backend, which sort of forces our architecture off of needing to use Rust in any way. I don't know. I think I'll probably mull about that. I'm definitely curious about other opinions, whatever. Feel free to like leave it in the comments if you're watching this after the fact. I feel like I should be using Rust more. Maybe it doesn't matter, and honestly, Tauri could serve as a container, and it's probably going to do its job. If we get with a light Tauri integration, using it sort of just as like a window wrapper, if we get desktop and mobile, when the mobile comes, I'm kind of okay with that being most of what it's doing. if we're handling most of that effort on the web view side of things, we'll just have to keep an eye on the performance. Because I feel like anything that I would want to do, I would also want to potentially do on the web app. I'm not keen on pushing everybody to the desktop app or the mobile app. Yeah. We'll mull on that. I think we're going to try this. Whichever way I'm pointing. I think we're going to try this on another stream. I think there's some use case for SQLite. I don't know that there's more. I think SQLite makes it easier to do the local first, which I think is important. So I don't think there's a strong reason to use a different database or way to store the data. I think SQLite or JSON Blob are probably going to be the big winners for us here. And the fact that this has encryption stuff kind of built into it too from a high level, it checks a lot of boxes. Then I think the only other consideration is how do we want to use Rust? The challenging piece is that SQLite is not Rust. If it were, it could change the view of how it could be designed. Yeah, it seems like they're doing a lot of that lift in like workers. And I feel like if we want to change that situation in any way, we're basically writing our own thing, which is not going to be, it's an effort. It's not something that we should easily write off. But it feels like it would make sense to have Rust handle the SQLite. I think that's the thing where I'm like kind of getting stuck, is like I feel like I should have Rust be doing some of this. But with something like this, it makes it easy to not have to do that. It might end up being that Rust handles more of our we can have Rust handle the settings. I think we could do some like light integration with Tauri handling the database and the CRDT part of it, and or like running a local server, because the subset, I think there's potentially, there's like everybody interested in the app. Then there's like a subset of people that are like appreciate the local first part of it, and are okay considering, or like if they had to handle their own data to get local first, they would probably go through that effort. But then once you start pushing on that, it means there's now a subset of people that are like, well, I also want sync with that. And now we're starting to get down to like a very small subset of people that are going to not use anything that we would potentially stand up to host data, want to run their thing locally, but also enable sync. And I think I would like to make that easy, but potentially a step before you hit that point where you need to be running a server in your own network, is that you could have like a Tauri app, and have that be sort of the thing that's like handling the database. Because you could have, so this is local first CRDT. So I think what you could do is you could have something like, I'm running it in a web app. It doesn't currently have access to the Tauri app running a server. So it's going to just save the data locally. When you get home or whatever, and you open up those things, it could then all sync up. So like you could almost use Tauri as an interface to, as the first step into running something that's more persistent, like a server on your local network. I feel like that's probably where it ends up making the most sense. Because otherwise, I think every other way that we would do it, a database with SQLite and migrations, is going to be painful. Painful enough and complicated enough to where it's almost easier not to bother and just work with a JSON blob. Because we could always just encrypt the JSON blob, and like you could have the web app do the decrypting or whatnot. So I think that's the thing to think about. We could toss a whole ton of complexity at it just to be able to use Rust, but is it going to provide us value over throwing stuff in the web view or in the web app? So yeah, I think that would be the first integration to be, if this works out, first integration would be use this. You could stand up a server that somebody could use to do their syncing. And that, nice. So you remember Bob just having trouble authing. So the first integration would be, if this works out, first integration would be using this, standing up our own server to host to have a place where people can have sync. Then the next integration could be pushing more of that onto a Tauri app on the Rust side of things, to where you can run a server locally using that, and then somebody could also, if we've enabled them to stand up a server, they could also just run their own server on, through a Docker container or whatever in their own network. I think that would let somebody ease into that would let us ease into the integration, but it also lets somebody ease into where they're comfortable, and how they want to store their data. Yeah, I think that's all I got there. I don't know that I haven't seen anything else as far as Tauri integrations go, and I think we've basically hit that point where we we have, if that works out, we've checked a whole lot of our boxes. And if that doesn't work out, we could potentially do something in the same vein. But I feel like SQLite and CRDT is going to be a lot of the keys. You know, it's going to hold a lot of the keys here. I think that's what we're going to call it, though. I do want to, y'all, we were too deep into things. I want to see if my commands work. We're down here, nope, down here. So, hey, okay, my counter worked. My counter worked, but the actual thing didn't work. Do I not have it in this scene? So let's work. I mean, my stats work, but here, let's just go back here real quick. Do I not do? Oh, Sag. Okay. More things to fix. I'm very hopeful that I'll get. Okay, this is gonna bother me a little bit. Did I just turn it off? Might have just turned it off. Model, stats, chat. Oh, do I not? Wait. No, it should be there. That's what's supposed to happen. Did Stream Elements is connected. Oh, hey, did it work? No, it didn't work. So, oh, hi, Kitty, hi. Yep, come on, come say hi. You're late. Oh, wait, I'm slipping. Yep, tail on my face. Hi. Turn that off. Go here, quick. Side distraction. Oh, did it like reconnect then? I just got a broadcast started. Why isn't it triggering? So I'm getting chat and stream events. So they should be coming into the chat events. Interesting. Whoop. No, I don't want to close you yet. I don't know. We'll fix it though. Our counter is working at least. Whoop, wrong way. Counter is working, so that's fun. We'll get it to work. That and the highlighting. I want to be able to highlight chat because we have some good discussions, and also I need to follow up links. I want to be able to allow people to drop links, at least people that I know aren't going to drop links that I do not want to see on stream, or y'all want to see on stream too. Here, can we just turn on we can try just the models page. Keep things even. No, I don't think this is gonna work with alerts. I wonder if I broke something when I did drop star. We'll debug it. We'll figure it out. It's been like on and off working as I've been like shifting things around, but I must have, as I was shifting things around to do that. I need to fix the CRDT. Like that's the thing that it's like we can use all this cool tech and we can make it really complex and use Rust and do this and this. And I'm like, seeing how much or how often this works, I'm always more keen to do something simple. But anyways, cool. So next week I might have meetings, so it might be a little bit different time, but I think we'll be still fine to stream on Tuesday. We'll just have to shift when I stream. I'm not sure what we're gonna do yet. I do want to get a couple of other guests on, and I do want to get some guests on. I haven't scheduled anything though, so it's probably not going to happen next week. But we might actually do this fly.io with this, play around with that. That might be a good thing to play with. We'll figure it out. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring that bell, do all those YouTube things that feel like I'm obligated to say. But I'll schedule the stream beforehand, at least a solid 8 hours ahead of time, so you'll know what the plan is going to be. So I'll see you next Tuesday. All right. Bye. I always lose my button. Let's try that again. Bye.